Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here, and I really mean it, that to spend 2 days with Australia's finest is something I look forward to every year. I forgot to ask Chris how many years we've been organising this event, but I think it's probably about 8. I've probably missed about 1. Every time I come to these events, I take back about 15 or 20 ideas back to work on the Monday, and I begin to implement those ideas with the team. And certainly it has added so much value. This event has added so much value to our organisation. So great to be here and great to be part of what we're going to do over the next 2 days. Like Cam and already some of the speakers already, I feel immensely positive about Australia and about the services that we provide to our oldest and finest. I arrived early this morning, and I had a particular wish, and that was to visit the reception area. So I went along to the reception area, and I met Jono, and I met Nolene, and I met Barbara, and they're all very efficient at the badge names. I might do a bit of walking around for this particular section, and I was particularly keen to find out what the price of a room was here in the Hyatt. And Nolene came to the desk and was very friendly and said, cheapest room was about $240 for the room. So I said, $240, I know something about accommodation. I happen to be involved heavily in it. So $240, what will that get me? Well, she said, I'll get you the room. I said, okay. Does an ensuite come with that? And he said, it comes with that. I said, how about a window? He said, we give you a window, but it doesn't open. I said, fair enough. I said, well, because I come from an environment where I am heavily involved in accommodation, my rooms are considered to be some of the largest in Australia, averaging 30 square meters. But what I'd like to ask you is, for that $240, can I have breakfast? Can I have morning tea? Can I have lunch? Can I have afternoon tea? Can I have dinner around about 9? Because that suits me. And around about 10:30, just as the game is finishing on TV, I'd like a plate of sandwiches brought to the room. Okay, facial expressions are changing at this stage, and she's wondering, what is this guy on? I then said, what's your recreational activities like? Because I'm here for a week, and I'd like to do a few things. Now, at this stage, I'm beginning to lose people, and they're all looking at each other saying, get the bouncers, this guy needs to go fast. I have a few dodgy needs as well, because in a previous era of my life, I was involved in sport, and like a lot of people around 55 or thereabouts, begins to hurt us. So I said, how about some physiotherapy while I'm here? How about 80 minutes of physiotherapy, 4 sessions of 20 minutes? And by the way, could you make sure the physiotherapist is good looking? Because I am the consumer, and I really would like to dictate how things go here. Make sure they use some of that physio cream, because I like the taste and the smell, rather, of Annika. Now, at this stage, really, they really think I need to remove myself. And I said, by the way, you said there's no window, but how about a patio? And she said to me, you're on the 7th floor, Mr. Foley. But just for you, we might just make an exception. Okay. So the point of this, as you can imagine, is that we're hearing an average of $175 is the average daily subsidy in our aged care facilities across Australia. I've come to one of the brightest places in Sydney today, and they've told me the cheapest room I can get for 29 square meters of a room is $240. Jono has now moved across to the phone, and he's speed dialing. Barbara has gone into the corner, and she's vibrating vigorously with laughter and just can't take on board what I'm saying. And I said to Jono, why are you making the phone call? Jono said, I'm actually ringing a psychiatrist because you need your health and your mental health assessed. And I said, well, come up to the first floor, because I've got 500 colleagues who are in a similar position. We're doing it for $175, and we're doing quality. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you, when we are coming in for criticism from a range of bodies right now, we need to remember that what we do every day and what the 360,000 people who are involved in this wonderful, great industry do is fantastic work. And as Cam has mentioned, there's a very small minority of people who don't have any place in our industry. We don't need the Royal Commission to tell us that. It is telling us that. Four Corners has told us that, and I'm suggesting we don't need to wait further. Let's clean those people away from our system, let them do honourable jobs like packing shelves, because they can't hurt tins of beans as they fall, but they do not need to be our industry. And let's begin to embrace the wonderful 360,000 people that make up this wonderful industry across home care, residential aged care facilities, and retirement villages. But I'm focusing on aged care for the moment. Okay, Chris has asked me to look at 3 areas briefly. The first is the Royal Commission. The second is funding, and the third is a model I've been talking about for maybe the last 6 or 7 months, which has gathered some attention in the industry, called the public-private consumer model. And sorry, I missed that bit, partnership model. So let me just focus on Royal Commission to begin with. Well, we've had 136 commissions, Royal Commissions, previously called some inquiries, now called Royal Commissions, since 1902. That's worth bearing in mind, because I think many of us would have been surprised and would be surprised with that figure, and I certainly was. The last one was something that we're still readily familiar with, is the Royal Commission into misconduct in banking, superannuation, and the financial industry, which reported just recently in the Hain Commission. Now, there were 79 recommendations from that Royal Commission, and we have to wonder whether those recommendations, or how many of those recommendations, will reach a point of legislation. And legislation is really where it matters, where people sit up and listen and do what they're supposed to do. Something that I'm close to is the 131st Royal Commission, which reported in 2017. And I know you're all across this as well. It was into the awful institutional child abuse that's occurred, particularly by the churches, the many churches across Australia. Now, there were 409 recommendations from that particular Royal Commission, 409. So far, none of them have found their way into any piece of legislation. And what I'm suggesting is that while the Royal Commissions are terribly serious, and they are, and they're to be treated as such by us all, in the public mind, they take front and center attention today. But I wonder whether they will by April 2020, when the final report will be produced. The Commission is going to say a number of things to us. We don't have to wait until the midterm report in October, and we shouldn't have to wait until April of next year. Just like the Banking or the Finance Commission, I suggest that they should be acting upon the recommendations now, because reputations can be lost in a minute, and they can take 10 years to build up. I suggest also that we as an industry, right across Australia, we don't wait for those recommendations. We know what the Commission is going to tell us. And I suggest some of the issues that they're going to cover will be as follows. The first one will be customer service, and it's wonderful to already hear at this early stage of the morning that we've begun to use very keen words about customer focus, customer centricity. We've talked about respect, and I'm going to comment on those words as well. But already the theme of the entire 2 days, I would suggest, is focused on the customer, and that's where everything has to come from and every value derives from. So I'm expecting that the recommendations are going to say something about customer service, and they're going to say we're not getting it right. And we know we're not getting it right. Now remember, every one of us is a customer. We do not need to read books. We don't need multiple consultants. We just need to take a few moments and think about what is customer service like for us, and then begin to circulate that and present it in everything we do with our residents. We're going to have some comments made about quality accommodation, and during the course of the next couple of days, we're all going to be talking about how we begin to renovate, refurbish, and also create capital development going forward. We're going to hear about protection. Some people have been badly abused in our system, and that is not acceptable. It is absolutely not acceptable. Back about 9 months ago, personally, I decided to take a particular approach as a CEO. I drafted, I suppose, a template, which takes about 30 minutes to talk through. And I met with every one of my staff to explain to them what my expectations are of myself and what my expectations are of every single one of those people, irrespective of position. And the focus of that entire presentation of 30 minutes, can do it in 25 as well on a good day, it was to do with the resident comes first. The resident comes first always. Every single thing we do, not simply because we derive value, but what I'm about to say is very, very clear for everyone to understand. No residents, no money. No money, no staff, no wages, no business. It's a very simple concept. And the fact that it's taking us so long, and I mean all of us so long, to get on top of this is a little bit surprising. But I think we know what we need to do in terms of moving forward. And during the course of the exercise, I decided to change the branding of Allambie Heights Village Limited to include the following. Our business is protection. It doesn't get more important than that. If we cannot protect our residents, if we cannot protect our staff, if we cannot protect our business, we shouldn't be involved. The essence of living, of survival, is to feel protected. And therefore, I will gladly say that what we do where I work is I protect and we protect. And I take that value terribly strongly. And the other bit that is totally important to me and to us all now is the culture of respect. I've often said in the past year that if everyone respected each other around the world, we would have no wars. We would never have to worry as a child walking into a schoolyard whether we're going to be bullied. And we can all understand all of those concepts because we respect each other, irrespective of where we've come from, where we're living, religion, gender, or any other concept. So the culture of respect is the most important value, I would suggest, that's going to come out of this particular 2 days, I hope. It's already started before me and Cam, but I also suggest that there's going to be a lot said about how we respect our residents in the Commission. Workforce. Well, workforce, very briefly, is about how do we get the right staff? Well, it starts with the advertisement at recruitment stage to get the right people in and keep the wrong people out of our industry. But then once we've employed people, we need to ensure that we supervise, we give appraisal, and we give feedback, and honest feedback. There's a wonderful phrase that goes something along the lines of clear is kind, unclear is unkind. We have to sit down with our staff, irrespective of who they are, and give honest feedback so we can develop them, because they are the most important resource after our residents or our customers. And we have to ensure that they understand at every stage of the exercise of working with us, that they do understand that they give feedback, we give feedback too. We also need to look at competitive remuneration, and that's something we'll continue to evolve as a discussion point over the next 2 days. So we've got to make sure we're in the competitive world. We have to bring the finest to us and the best to us, and we have to pay them. I certainly pay all our staff above award rates, and some of them considerably above award rates, because I value them, and that's why they stay with us. And that's important for us all to look at. We have to look at staff qualifications, and I know that Chris has already announced that some of the qualifications he's interested in doing is our retirement village managers. There's certainly importance that we take something from education, baseline, and move forward. And I'm just going to suggest that something else might come up in the Royal Commission around qualifications. Australia, which is my adopted home, is an absolutely wonderful place to live. But we're very arrogant as Australians about qualifications. We're very arrogant about the qualifications of Australia being better than others. I have to say, having lived in 4 countries, the qualifications across those 4 countries are sometimes equal to and better than, and the people who have those qualifications are better than what we currently have. So we need to embrace the qualifications across the world, never substandard, but we need to understand that those qualifications have been hard fought for by our colleagues. And the last thing I think I would suggest about workforce is that Cam has already mentioned something about this, is what view the industry and the wider community has about nursing and care staff ratios. I am not someone who believes in staff ratios. I have arduously argued that point. I've written to the Minister of Health of New South Wales on 2 occasions, and on both occasions, I'm sure many other people did too, the I suppose motivation of some other parties to create nursing ratios through New South Wales was failed. So I think that's important. Staff ratios, the evidence for staff ratios do not point to increased care. They do simply point to increased costs. Last few quick points. I will expect that the complaints scheme will be highly criticised. The complaints team that currently exists will be criticised. There will be an overhaul. Sorry, is my voice slipping in and out, or is it okay? It's okay, thanks. The complaint scheme will be criticised. I don't think anyone's happy either consumers, residents, relatives, or operators who are the subject of complaints are happy with the system, and it will be overhauled. Accreditation is already beginning to change. We'll move from 4 standards and 44 outcomes to 8 standards, and already we should be engaging our staff in that transition over the next few weeks, so we're ready by the 1st of July to implement a new accreditation system. I will say something briefly about that in a few moments. And then we come to the funding and best approaches to meet our customers' needs. So let's look at how it works in the home care and residential aged care sectors. Well, ACFI, as you might know, started in 2008. It is awaiting reform, and I understand this week that the University of Wollongong has produced some draft ACFI alternatives, which will be trialled and obviously commented upon over the next while, and then it will take something of a transition of maybe 24 months to implement a new system. I don't have any information about that system right now, but I think anyone of us that is through the ACFI system would welcome the change. First and foremost, I'd say about ACFI, it is onerous, it's complex, and it's purposely designed to be. And the reason I say that, ladies and gentlemen, is because we're not expected by the government to maximize the ACFI. This slide is something that was shared with me by Miris, of whom we're a client. And what I might do is I might just walk a little bit. As you can see, if you're familiar with this, and some of you might not be, ACFI briefly is broken down over 3 particular categories. The first one is activities of daily living. The second one is behaviors, and the third is complex healthcare. Now, I'll just use this slide if I can. If I can point you, it's not going to work for me. Okay, that's okay. So, no, it's not going to work. Yes, maybe it will. There we are. Why is that not working? Not working? It's not reaching. Okay, there we are. It's not. Can you see that? It's not very good, is it? At this height. There. Can you see that? Is that okay? Okay. The level we're looking at here is look at the high levels of 11271 for activities of daily living. Behaviors high level $36.90. And finally, complex healthcare, which is a high of 68. The maximum that you can actually claim is $217.77 per day. And that is excluding oxygen, which is a bit more, and enteral feeding. Now, if you're involved in those 2 last aspects, you're really involved in very acute care. And really, the person might well be on their way to hospital. But if they're not, if they're staying in our aged care facility, because we're involved in aging in place, we will get a very small an amount of money for a very small amount of time. But what I want to suggest to you is follows. Look at where this started in 2008. The activities of daily living, which has got a high of $112, has a range of, per hour, $1.55 to $4.69 per hour per resident per day. Look towards the behaviors, and this is where, right now, our job is. This is where our future in care is. We've moved beyond 2008, and those of us who were in the business in 2008 will remember we had low care. Not many low care is available, low care environments, they do exist, but not many are surviving very well. And the industry was being pushed. We didn't lead. We were being pushed by consumer demand and specifically by government demand and Department of Health demand. We were being pushed into an area of business that I do not believe we ever checked. We didn't check as an industry, is this where we wanted to go? We just followed the direction of where the dollars were going. And we followed with the care and the cost levels. And what that means is that we have moved away from the activities of daily living, which still exist, but we're moving more and more towards the behaviors in relation to people with dementia. And I would say that 80% plus of our entire market now, and it will be 100% over the next few years, is around people who've got levels of dementia. And the current per hourly rate for someone with those behaviors is 35 cents to $1.50 per hour. Finally, complex healthcare. We are expecting, and we're seeing as operators, that as time has moved on, we are being expected by the consumer, we're being expected by the Department of Health, who controls all of this, to provide the highest level of care short of hospital and sometimes even replacing hospital care. What that breaks down as is 69 cents per hour to $2.84. Now, I don't know what you can do here with this. I've just told you that I can't even get a room here for less than $240. And we're being asked to provide all of this care, complex health care, for 69 cents a day to $2.84. Now, this is where we have to start talking about units of measurement. I'll comment about that in a second. We are insufficient, and we're not doing ourselves a favor in not having the correct units of measurement across Australia. These are figures and these are units that we should be popping off our tongue, and we should all be across them. We should not be waiting for Four Corners to attack us. We should not be waiting for the Department of Health or the Royal Commission, who are very well versed in terms of their questioning of the Aged Care Guild or anyone else who it might be. What is your return on equity? We should know those questions and we should know those answers. And right now, I think it's appalling that we're being asked by the Department of Health and by the consumer to provide the level of care across that spectrum for a maximum, this is a maximum of $217 a day, and across that range of activities that I, in a humorous way, suggested, I asked when I visited here, and of course I made the story up. So there's no Jono, no Nolene, and there's no colleague. And they do a very fine job downstairs. But what it does say to me, ladies and gentlemen, is that the industry has got away from us. It's being led by the Department of Health, and I think we're going to move on to that right now. I just want to say as a link, I've estimated, and I'm not the expert in this, I estimate that at a time when the Department of Health has to hide to criticize us for gaming around ACFI, and that is an appalling insinuation about what we do as an industry, I estimate that we're underclaiming by somewhere between $1 and $2 billion. $3 billion was taken out of our industry a number of years ago, particularly around the complex healthcare area, at a time when that is the focus and behaviors is the focus of our industry going forward. I estimate $1.2 billion. Let me tell you how we get to that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just go back to that slide very quickly. Could I suggest that out of those three categories, when we have people analyzing in our staff group, that they might just make a mistake of $6 anywhere out of that $117. We can actually use this imagination and just run with it for a moment. $6 is a cup of coffee. Could they possibly make a mistake or not apply because they're steeped with other particular levels of work? $6 a day per resident across 240,000 residents in the aged care facility equals $500 million. If you say $11, that's $1 billion. And if you say $22, that's $2 billion. Now, I'm not an expert in this. There are other people in the room who've got access to far more information. I'm simply suggesting that we are underclaiming. And how do I know? Because I was. With my good colleagues, we moved in a space of 15 months, we moved our average daily subsidy from $120 to almost $170. $175 is the average daily subsidy across Australia. I don't want to go too much beyond 175 to 180, because the profit margin then begins to dwindle, and you end up between costs and revenue flatlining. I'm not in the business. As a not-for-profit, I am not in the business to make a loss. And 42% of my colleagues, and it might be just a bit less than that I'm hearing, are making a loss. And that is not acceptable, because you cannot run a business without making profits. And the profits from my sector stay in the company. We use it to develop, and we use it to increase our comfort levels and the staffing levels and the payments that we make to our staff. In relation to the listed companies, fair play to you. If you've made an absolute profit, you shouldn't be criticized for it, because your investors have actually taken the risk, and they should be rewarded for that risk. If they've made a 6.5% return on equity or return on investment, then that's exactly what they expect. You will not get higher than 3% in a term deposit, so why should they put their money there at the moment in a bank? Unless there's a perfectly good product thereafter. And this is a great industry for them to be involved in. And I advocate for not-for-profits, for-profits, for listed companies to stay involved in our industry. We cannot afford for you to leave us. So let's get claiming. And let's ensure that we're maximizing the claiming. And whether it's $500 million or whether it's $1 billion, I suggest we're underclaiming. The government is keen to announce and throw around figures that taxpayer money amounts to about 60 or 70% of the entire cost or revenues for aged care facilities. Well, just as an example, I'm happy to share with you that in our aged care facility, Allambie Heights Village Limited, and we only have one aged care facility, you can see 2016, 17 and 18 financial years. In all of those, our use or receipt of taxpayers' money was less than 60%, which means we have to find, like everyone else does, the monies elsewhere to provide the other 40% plus to find that we need to find that money elsewhere in order to provide the great services that we can. So, as we know, most providers, we cover all the capital costs unless we live in rural environments where we can get grants from the department. So most of us are providing and taking those risks around our own capital costs. We're also renovating. We are providing all the maintenance and preventative maintenance. We keep the gardens presentable, and we involve ourselves in any new capital. If you're a listed company, you may be able to, or you will be able to go to your shareholders. If you are involved in the private sector, you may be able to get some private equity. If you're a not-for-profit, you have to show, you have to demonstrate that you have got the ability to run a good business, that you can get the correct returns on your equity and on your assets. And you have to show as well they've got good cash reserves. Because when I go to a bank, I need to demonstrate that I and my colleagues run a very successful business for them to take the risk and their shareholders to take a risk. So this is language that we need to openly talk about, and there's no dirty words here. We need everyone involved in this industry going forward. We do not need, and we can't afford for people to leave the industry. We carry all the financial risks and the double debt of repaying a loan to a bank, plus that double debt of repaying the RAD, the accommodation payment, to the outgoing resident. And I'd also like to suggest that ACFI does not discriminate in any shape or form in relation to where a provider is located. So someone in Vaucluse who's actually had to spend significant sums of money to buy the land and develop there gets the same ACFI as someone who's living in Broken Hill or Alice Springs or some other socioeconomic group setting. I want to briefly talk about government control because Chris has already mentioned and referred to me in his opening statements. I'm just going to run through this very, very quickly. I'm suggesting that there's way too much government control, and I'm going to say there's way too much government interference. The government currently right now dictates the supply through its ACAR rounds, which need to be eradicated, removed, and we need the industry to be deregulated. If I can offer an excellent service on the northern beaches of Sydney and someone is running at a vacancy rate of 20 to 30%, then why should they be carrying those bed licenses? And why should I have to engage in an open market that not many people know about, and pay $70,000 current rate for a licensed bed? That is an absolute scandal, and that's a shame. And we went to the Department of Health and said, do you know this is going on? And they said, we do. I said, how can you offer $0 going through a very onerous ACAR round, and you now expect me to wait a year plus, perhaps, for your decision? I need these beds now, but I need to go to the open market. And I said, go and do it. Now, there's something wrong about that too, ladies and gentlemen. It dictates the location of the bed licenses because it has a limit on where we can develop our services. And it rations supply and dictates where the services can be provided. It dictates the price. We know it dictates the price. It's called ACFI. And it dictates largely the accommodation payment. So it's $550,000 as a max. Years after, 2014, no consumer price index has followed that. So we're chasing $550,000 unless we go through another onerous paper process to the Aged Care Commissioner. It sets the compliance standards. It operates the complaint scheme. It engages in wages control through its involvement with the Fair Work legislation, and it prejudices and favours the involvement of trades unions. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll just say something briefly about that. To be treated as an endangered species is something I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to trade unions. At the moment, there's 1.2 million people, I believe, in the workforce, which represents about 11% of people who are in trade unions, which means that the rest aren't. So to have a particular favourable position at the table is not fair play. And to have the ability to walk into any business place within 24 hours notice is something that is grossly unfair, and that needs to be repealed as a piece of legislation. And absolutely. Well, I think nothing is ever achieved easily unless you do it correctly. As I say, there's a lot of attention being given to the position of trade unions in response to my colleague, and I suggest there's a different way of looking at things. Okay, let's move to the last point that I've been asked to talk about. And briefly, I want to say that this is something I've thought about over the last year. And it's because, I suppose, working across council, state, and federal levels, as we do, I've become very frustrated, like many of us, when we're trying to do something. And particularly when we can see that there is a way ahead, that we're all very enthused and positive about what we want to achieve and about how we can actually meet the needs of our customers. I believe we are customer focused, and I believe that we can be better and we will be better. But right now, I'm calling it the partnership approach that we need. It's public, private, consumer, which means resident, but it also means government for me. And I'll expand on that in a second. The customers, I suggest, need to pay more. That's already been alluded to. We need to plan. We need to take responsibility and to begin planning now for the rest of our lives, which, sorry, we do that with superannuation for the final years of our lives. I think Australia can be very proud of what we've achieved in terms of superannuation. Very, very proud of what we've achieved there. However, we are not planning successfully or appropriately for the last 3 years of our lives, and I believe that we need to start doing that in order to ensure that we pay a particular price and contribute to that package going forward. We cannot expect a diminishing number of taxpayers, as Cam has highlighted already, a diminishing number of taxpayers to continue to pay for all of us until we die. I believe that as providers we need to create a culture of strong customer focus, and I believe in the position of free trade. People will pay a fair price for a fair service, and that's the way we've run the economies over the world successfully. I believe we now need to change the paradigm. It's broken, it's outdated, and we need to change it. From government provider, as we call them, to government customer and purchaser. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the government does not wish, and they do an awful job at providing services that we provide. That's why 95% of our services are provided by us. So the important bit is they need to enter into a contract with us. They are no longer the provider, in my way of thinking, and they become the customer. And as customers, we will treat them in the same way that we treat every customer going forward, with respect, and we will provide value to them. But the paradigm of control has got to change. The paradigm where they dictate everything has got to change. And what we need to start bargaining for is a new deal with the government and a new deal with the Department of Health in particular, where we are the contractors and they are the customers. As contractors, we need to be values and ethically driven. Ethics is so important in what we do, and values need to be very important in what we do. There needs to be mutual respect between all partners. I went through a process in the last year of 24 audit and regulatory processes, 3 of which were for our retirement villages and the rest were for our residential aged care facility. 25th audit process happened 2 weeks ago when a nice lady from the New South Wales Fire Brigade showed up unannounced and said, "I'd like to visit your sprinkler system." I said, the sprinkler system's been here since 2009. Well, we've only got around to counting them since 2016. We're at 2019 and New South Wales is still counting the number of sprinklers in our systems. Now, I already have an AFSS, an annual fire safety statement. I've got certification coming out of my head and my eardrums. I don't need to be regulated anymore. And when Ken Wyatt made the announcement back in October, on a Wednesday afternoon, he said, "We do not need a Royal Commission." I applauded him and I agreed with him. On Sunday, ScoMo decided we did need a Royal Commission. Now, I did not believe, with 24 audit and regulatory processes going on in our industry and certainly in my particular environment, which reaches every compliance every year and is top rated, you've got to change the mirrors. You've got to turn the mirrors in this one and say, where were the auditors? Where were the regulators? Where were they doing their jobs? They weren't. And that's the essence of it. So everyone needs to get more honest about this, and everyone needs to get more respectful. At council level, at state level, and at federal level, we are not talking to each other, and they are not prepared to sit down with us. We are a significant contributor in terms of our salary base and in terms of the revenues that we bring into the local community. We have to touch our power. We have to touch the power of our local areas and touch the power of what we represent across Australia. And we need to negotiate a different deal with the government based on that. And we can diminish the amount of red tape and bureaucracy if we can get council, state, and federal talking to each other, and the myriad of other contractors by simply going through whatever the latest technology is to actually say, we don't need to check you. It's been checked by someone else. So we need to do some work on that. So respect is very, very important to me. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'm suggesting a partnership in planning, in paying, and providing great services across Australia to our older persons. In the 1960s, a very famous Irish-American president suggested that in the 10 years of the 60s, they could reach the moon and walk in it. And they did. As a far less famous, or someone who's got no fame at all, I can say as an Australian Irishman to you all today that Australia can be the best in the world in terms of offering the very finest and the very best in aged care, in home care, and in retirement living. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we can try and do that over the next 5 years. I think we should set the target, and I think that we can also contribute to the economy of Australia by having tourists coming to us and viewing the great services that we are providing and that we can provide over the next 5 years. And to finish, ladies and gentlemen, with a particularly nice saying that I like to use, the fastest human being ever in the world, Usain Bolt, says the following: anything is possible. Don't think limits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ciarán, and thank you very much, Cam. We were looking to have some questions and some dialogue, but we're trying to keep to our schedule as well. One question has come to the floor, and then I'd like to ask one more. Just a quick answer if I can, Ciarán. The question is, please clarify thinking on why $180 plus ACFI is unprofitable.
It should be profitable. It should be profitable. I can testify at $170 ACFI plus other income or revenue that we receive, we are profitable. And we're handsomely profitable, and we should be so. So I'm going to suggest the following. I do not like to hear that there's 42% of our colleagues who are doing it hard and are making a loss. I've already suggested that we can't afford for people to leave this industry. At a time when the Guild is talking about 58 million, I think, or 58 billion, I heard it was 33. So I'm going to suggest that we need to start getting our units of measurement correct across Australia. And somewhere between 33 billion and 58 billion, there's truth there. We cannot afford for anyone to leave this industry at a time when we need to grow and develop to meet not just the status quo of the numbers, but also to be ahead of the customers who want to come into our industry. So why are people making losses? Quickly, I would suggest the ACFI is not being maximised. And it's not being maximised because of embarrassment. We've got some people involved in the ACFI application process who are not the right people. Let's put it straight. They're not the right people, and they're not particularly skilled in that area. We've got the best of nurses. Why are registered nurses engaged in an ACFI process full time? They need to be on the floor, and they need to be doing great things. Let's get specialists in ACFI, and let's get specialists making sure that we can honestly and robustly get across the ACFI. Finally, I'd say, Chris, I think there's a lot of lazy money around Australia. I know about this. I have to ask the question, why are some of our colleagues risk averse or risk frightened? We have an accommodation payment that is coming legitimately through all of the prudential standards, and we've been doing prudential standards before the banks knew what they were, and we've been doing them well and fairly. Why do we have significant billions of dollars sitting in on-call accounts? I can testify that my company earned 13.3% through our investment process. And that is contributed to not just our company return on equity, our company profits, but also our RICF in terms of the investments, because we invested that properly. So I'd suggest at $180 ACT fee and basic daily care fees, means income tested fees, and what we should be getting from the RAD as an investment, we should not have a system where people are losing money. They should be making profit. I will say, I'm prepared, without any sense of arrogance, I am prepared to hold out the hand of friendship and say to any of those 41 or 2% colleagues who are losing money, make a phone call. I'm happy to sit down and show you a way. I'm happy to say that I'm sure other people in this room are prepared to do that too. We need you. We do not need you exiting the industry.
I think everybody's going to start making a beeline to you. One quick question. Well, if I can play devil's advocate, because we're supposed to be challenging all of this. So I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking, yeah, right. I'm sorry, Ciarán. I hear what you say.
Yep.
I don't see any leadership that is going to be respected and that the government is going to respond to. So we agreed the Department of Health runs the place, but I don't see anybody stepping up that they respect and will take any notice of. So where is the leadership? A quick answer. Have you got an answer on this?
Yep, it's in this room. It's in this room. It's called the Leaders Summit. Look at the power and the strength and the ability and your ability to articulate. It's your duty. It is your duty to articulate for our customers.
I'm going to play devil's advocate again. We've all got a day job, and divided, we're divided. We're not going to conquer by division.
I think I know where you're going with this, Chris.
So, Cam, my second question is, and you mentioned Denmark and other countries that have made the transition. We need to have leadership to articulate that and get the government to agree to it. What happened in those other countries, let's say Denmark, Germany and so on, that could be achieved? I pointed out that the insurance companies led it in America. What can we learn from them? And do you see anything on the horizon?
Look, it's a good question, Chris. The impetus for a lot of countries to make massive change, unfortunately, in my experience, has usually been because they started to get to the point of running out of money. And if you have a look at the changes that took place with the Thatcher reforms in the 80s, a lot of that had been driven from a financial impetus. Yeah. Other countries, New Zealand with its ageing in place policy, probably had a balance of, and there are Kiwis here today that would understand it better, but they probably had a combination of policy directives that more people wanted to stay at home, and also financial constraints that meant that they needed to invest less in aged residential care, as they call it, their rest homes and hospitals. And so there's been different things that have driven it. It's not without smart policy, but a lot of it has so far been financially driven. The beauty of where we are at the moment is we're not at that precipice yet. We are extremely lucky that we can still have debates about whether or not the family home is actually an asset. But if we continue to go in the way that we're going at the moment, we will erode our capacity to be able to draw down on the huge wealth that we've got. I sort of disagree also that the devil's advocate position you took is that it's hopeless. And I don't see the Department of Health as being the enemy here either. They've got a difficult job to undertake. They are continually making recommendations to government, either directly or through ACFA, that we need to be reinvesting our resources to where people want the services. And in order for us to do that, we need to change a paradigm where 94% of people get what they're getting for free. That means we've got to be realistic about where the money comes from. They've got to wrestle with these really tight budgets every year. The government looks to balance the budget. They're asked to make savings quickly, and then they'll make those savings, sometimes intentionally overcorrecting so they can deal with us and pare it back a little bit. So I think actually there's better alignment than we think. I think the department, not meaning to talk for them, but I would think that the department would like less of that pressure of funding a bunch of people that can fund themselves. I think the industry would like the flexibility of not being dictated to by the department because they control all the purse strings. And I think consumers would like the opportunity to have a proper investment in their services and therefore a capacity to be able to say not only what it looks like but where they get it. I actually think there's really good alignment here. There's a big scary conversation that has to be taken up with the most powerful cohort of the population, which is around their responsibilities for paying for services that they're going to get in the future. That, to me, is the trigger for just about everything else that we've talked about to happen in a natural way. Or we can wait till we run out of dough, and in 20 years, it'll be forced upon us.
Chris, you asked about leadership. I'm not sure whether this is the direction you were going to, as you were trying to get to as well. But I happen to believe that there's too much representation amongst employer bodies or operator peak bodies, peak industries. I think there needs to be a collated, united voice. Politicians and certainly the Minister of Health takes up a portfolio that lasts about 18 months. The people who run the departments, the civil servants. So we got to win. We have to win the argument with some of our politicians, and they're keen to hear solutions, not more problems. And what I learned in politics from the age of 16 onwards, in my involvement at different levels in a younger age, do not give a politician problems. Give him or her solutions. And I think we need to get better at that. We need to articulate the arguments, and we certainly need to articulate some of those statistics a lot more keen than we are doing right now.
I think, again, if we just talk the realities, and your point about the number of ministers for aged care that we've had over the last 18 years, that's probably about 14 of them really, Mark Butler only being the really stable one, is accurate. But until we are respected at a political level, really we have no power. So what is, going to your point, Ciarán, what is required is for everybody here to recognise that we have to be talking to our local politicians and making it a local issue that the local politicians take back to Canberra. Because without a government voice, a political voice, we're going nowhere. The reality is traditionally there is no votes in the senior cohort. So people over 60 historically do not change their votes, and therefore they're not important when it comes to elections. And whilst that's the case, we don't have much strength. So we've got to change that. Then when we go to leadership, just for the purpose of the room, about trade unions, we bang on about it with our publications, but the ANMF has been the driver of all the discontent in this sector. They are the largest union in Australia with 275,000 members. The minimum membership fee, which is tax deductible, to be a member of the ANMF is $400 a year. So their collected income each year is $108 million. That is the resource they have to get mandated staff ratios, to lobby, to get, as Bupa had last year, 200 people standing outside their headquarters in T-shirts and placards and so on. They employ the most expensive lobbyist here in Sydney on speed dial. So everybody in this room, that's the competition to get the voice, to get things to change. I'm not supposed to be the speaker today, but before I go, finally, the future, I mentioned earlier, is home care, and that at the moment the sector is not really set up to capitalise on the opportunity, and I believe the big guys are going to do that. But they're going to sweep clean the old system, like Uber did with the taxi industry, and come in with a new set of rules, and there will be 3 or 4 of them who will have a combined voice and go to government with a combined voice and say we can convert all this money from the traditional inefficient process to our efficient process. So once again, it's a matter of the people in this room. You've got to decide if you're going to get behind one of our peak bodies and really support them, and also get out into your local communities. Otherwise, we will not join Denmark, Germany and others and get a good result for our residents. I'll get off my soapbox. Can we thank Ciarán and Cam for their presentation?
Welcome, Cam. Thank you.